The dust from the cattle drive hadn't yet settled when Catherine Hayes stepped off the stagecoach in Laramie, Wyoming Territory on a blistering afternoon in July 1878. Her entire life packed into one worn carpetbag, and her heart filled with equal parts desperation and determination. She was 22 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and weighed perhaps 95 pounds soaking wet. But she had come west for one reason alone: to disappear from the life that had nearly crushed her spirit back in Philadelphia. Her father's debts, her mother's death, and a man who thought he could buy her hand in marriage had driven her across half a continent to this wild, untamed land where she hoped her size wouldn't matter as much as her willingness to work. The town of Laramie sprawled before her in shades of brown and gray, buildings constructed hastily from timber and hope, streets churned to powder by endless wagon wheels and cattle hooves. Catherine clutched her bag tighter and made her way down the wooden sidewalk, her modest traveling dress already covered in a fine layer of dust. She had exactly $17 to her name and no prospects beyond a newspaper advertisement she'd answered 3 weeks ago, seeking workers for the Double Creek Ranch 20 miles north of town. The advertisement hadn't specified what kind of workers, and Catherine hadn't asked questions before boarding that train in Philadelphia. The Silver Dollar Saloon stood on the corner where the rancher had said to meet him, and Catherine hesitated only a moment before pushing through the doors. The interior was dim and cool, a relief from the relentless sun, and smelled of whiskey, tobacco, and sawdust. A dozen pairs of eyes turned toward her, and she lifted her chin, refusing to show the fear that coiled in her stomach. A man at the bar, tall and broad-shouldered with silver, threading through his dark hair, looked her up and down with an expression that shifted from curiosity to something like disappointment. "You hear about the ranch work?" he asked, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. Catherine nodded, setting her bag down carefully. I answered the advertisement from Mr. James Thornton of the Double Creek Ranch." "That's me," the man said, straightening. He was perhaps 50 years old, weathered by sun and wind, with hands that looked strong enough to wrestle a steer to the ground. "And you are?" "Catherine Hayes. I can work hard, Mr. Thornton. I'm willing to do whatever you need." James Thornton's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. He glanced at the other men in the saloon, and Catherine heard someone snort with laughter. Heat rose in her cheeks, but she held her ground. She had expected this. She had prepared herself for doubt, for dismissal, but she hadn't traveled 2,000 miles to give up at the first sign of skepticism. "Miss Hayes," Thornton said carefully, "the work at Double Creek is demanding. We're running cattle, breaking horses, mending fences, hauling supplies. It's dawn to dusk, often longer. The pay is fair, but the labor is hard." "I understand," Catherine said. "I'm stronger than I look." Before Thornton could respond, another voice cut through the room, smooth and steady like water over river stones. "She came all this way, James. Least you could do is let her try." Catherine turned toward the speaker and felt something shift in her chest, a sensation like the ground tilting beneath her feet. The man who had spoken sat at a corner table, his chair tipped back against the wall, a wide-brimmed hat pushed back to reveal dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He couldn't have been more than 26 or 27, with a face that was all strong lines and quiet confidence. His eyes, a startling shade of blue-gray, met hers across the room, and Catherine found she couldn't look away. "This isn't your concern, Cole," Thornton said, but there was no real heat in his words. The man called Cole let his chair drop back to all 4 legs and stood, unfolding to a height of well over 6 feet. He wore dusty work clothes, a gun belt slung low on his hips, and moved with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own skin. "Actually, it is my concern. You put me in charge of hiring for the summer crew, remember? Said I had final say on who we brought on." Thornton's jaw tightened. "Cole Garrett, you're my best hand, and I trust your judgment on most things, but this girl weighs less than a bag of grain. How's she supposed to handle ranch work?" "Why don't we find out?" Cole said, crossing the room to stand beside Catherine. Up close, he smelled of leather and sage, and when he looked down at her, his expression was thoughtful rather than dismissive. "You ever worked with cattle, Miss Hayes?" Catherine swallowed. Honesty seemed the only option with those steady eyes on her. "No, sir. But I've worked in a textile mill for 4 years. I know about long hours and hard labor. I learn fast, and I don't complain." "A textile mill," Cole repeated, and something flickered across his face. "That's brutal work in its own right. What brought you west?" "I needed a fresh start," Catherine said, meeting his gaze directly. "There was nothing left for me in Philadelphia." Cole studied her for a long moment, and Catherine had the unsettling feeling he could see straight through to her bones, reading all the secrets she carried. Then he turned to Thornton. "I'm hiring her. She can bunk in the spare room in the main house, and I'll personally make sure she pulls her weight. If she can't handle it after 2 weeks, she can leave with wages for the time she put in. Fair enough?" Thornton looked between them, his expression torn between exasperation and something that might have been amusement. "Your funeral, Cole. But don't expect me to explain this to Dutch when he sees her." "Dutch will deal with it," Cole said firmly. He picked up Catherine's carpetbag with one hand, the muscles in his forearm flexing beneath his rolled sleeve. "Come on, Miss Hayes. We've got a ride ahead of us, and I want to get back before full dark." Catherine followed him out of the saloon, her heart hammering against her ribs. She hadn't expected anyone to give her a chance, let alone defend her to their employer. The afternoon sun hit her like a physical blow after the coolness of the saloon, and she blinked against the brightness. Cole led her to a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses, their coats gleaming with sweat in the heat. "Who's Dutch?" Catherine asked as Cole tossed her bag into the wagon bed. "Ranch Foreman," Cole said, offering her his hand to help her up onto the seat. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle despite the obvious strength in his fingers. "He's been with the Double Creek since before I was born. He's good at his job, but he's got some old-fashioned notions about who can and can't do ranch work. Don't let him get under your skin." Catherine settled onto the hard wooden seat, arranging her skirts. "Why did you speak up for me? You don't know anything about me." Cole swung up beside her and gathered the reins, clicking his tongue to set the horses moving. The wagon lurched forward, wheels creaking, and they headed north out of Laramie toward open country. "I know you've got sand," he said after a moment. "Takes courage to walk into a saloon full of strangers and ask for work when you know they're all thinking you can't do it. I respect that." "Sand," Catherine repeated. "Grit, spine, whatever you want to call it." Cole kept his eyes on the road ahead, where the rutted track stretched toward distant mountains that rose like broken teeth against the sky. "Plenty of men twice your size don't have half your nerve. Figure that counts for something." They rode in silence for a while, and Catherine took in the landscape rolling past on either side. The land was vast in a way that made her chest ache. Endless grassland dotted with sagebrush, and the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking where water ran. The sky seemed impossibly huge, a blue dome that stretched from horizon to horizon without interruption. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, so different from the cramped streets and sooty buildings of Philadelphia that Catherine felt like she'd stepped onto another planet entirely. "What kind of work will I be doing?" she asked finally. Cole glanced at her, and she saw something like approval in his expression. "Whatever needs doing. We've got 2,000 head of cattle spread across 15,000 acres. Spring roundup is finished, but there's always stock to check, fences to repair, horses to exercise. The house needs help too, cooking and cleaning for the crew. Mrs. Thornton passed away 2 years ago, and James has been managing on his own since then. But it's rough on him." "I can cook," Catherine said, relieved to have at least one skill she could offer with confidence. "My mother taught me before she died, and I can sew, mend, keep accounts if needed." "That'll help," Cole said. "But I'm going to teach you ranch work too. If you're going to be here, you should know how to handle yourself with the stock, how to ride properly, how to rope if necessary. Never know when you might need those skills out here." Catherine studied his profile, the straight line of his nose, the firm set of his jaw. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Cole was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "My mother was small like you, barely came up to my father's shoulder, but she could outwork any man on our ranch back in Colorado, and she never let anyone tell her she couldn't do something because of her size. She died when I was 14, and I guess I've got a soft spot for women who remind me of her." "I'm sorry for your loss," Catherine said softly. "It was a long time ago," Cole said, but his voice carried an old grief that time hadn't quite erased. "Point is, size isn't everything. Heart matters more. You've got heart, I can see it. Let's see what else you've got." The sun was sliding toward the western horizon when the Double Creek Ranch came into view. The main house was a sprawling structure of timber and stone, 2 stories tall with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Outbuildings scattered across the surrounding area included a massive barn, several corrals, a bunkhouse, and various storage sheds. Cattle grazed in the near pastures, red and brown bodies moving lazily through the grass. It was more impressive than Catherine had imagined, a working ranch that spoke of years of hard effort and careful management. Cole pulled the wagon up near the main house and set the brake. "Let me do the talking with Dutch," he said, jumping down and coming around to help Catherine descend. "He's not going to be happy, but he'll come around." As if summoned by his name, a man emerged from the barn, striding toward them with the bow-legged gait of someone who'd spent his entire life in the saddle. He was perhaps 60, lean and tough as jerky, with a gray mustache that drooped past his jawline and eyes that could probably see through solid rock. He took one look at Catherine and stopped dead in his tracks. "What in the hell is this?" Dutch demanded, his voice like gravel sliding down a metal chute. "This is Catherine Hayes," Cole said calmly, retrieving her bag from the wagon. "James hired her for the summer crew." "Like hell he did," Dutch said, closing the distance between them. He looked Catherine up and down with an expression of pure disbelief. "Girl, how much do you weigh? 90 pounds? 85? You wouldn't last a day out here. This is ranch work, not some church social." Catherine lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed by the foreman's hostility. "I'm willing to work hard and learn. That's all I'm asking for, a chance to prove myself." "Prove yourself?" Dutch snorted. "Honey, a strong wind would blow you clear into next week. You can't handle horses, you can't wrestle cattle. You sure as shooting can't haul feed or mend fence. You're too small to work a ranch, plain and simple." "That's enough, Dutch," Cole said, his voice taking on an edge Catherine hadn't heard before. "James gave the okay, and I'm taking responsibility for her. She'll work under my supervision, and if there are any problems, they're my problems, not yours." Dutch's eyes narrowed as he looked between Cole and Catherine. "You're making a mistake, boy. She's going to get hurt, or she's going to quit, and either way, it's a waste of everyone's time." "Then it's my time to waste," Cole said flatly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I need to get Miss Hayes settled in before supper." He walked past Dutch without waiting for a response, and Catherine hurried to follow, her face burning. She could feel the foreman's eyes boring into her back, feel the weight of his judgment and skepticism. It was exactly what she'd feared, exactly what she'd faced her entire life. People deciding she wasn't capable before giving her a chance to show what she could do. Cole led her up the porch steps and into the main house. The interior was tidy but clearly lacked a woman's touch, all functional furniture and bare walls. A large stone fireplace dominated one end of the main room, and doorways led off to what Catherine assumed were bedrooms and a kitchen. Cole carried her bag up a narrow staircase to the second floor and opened a door to a small room with a single bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the front pasture. "It's not much," Cole said, setting her bag on the bed, "but it's private and the door locks. You'll take meals with the crew in the bunkhouse, but you can come and go from the main house as you please. Outhouse is around back, and there's a pump for washing up by the kitchen door." Catherine looked around the room, her throat tight. It was more than she'd expected, infinitely better than the cramped boarding house room she'd shared with 3 other women in Philadelphia. "It's perfect. Thank you, Mr. Garrett." "Cole," he corrected. "Out here, we don't stand on formality much. Get yourself settled, then come down to the bunkhouse for supper. I'll introduce you to the rest of the crew." He paused in the doorway, his expression serious. "Dutch is going to make things difficult. Some of the other men might too. But you stand your ground, do your work, and don't let them see you rattle. Can you do that?" "I can," Catherine said, and meant it. She hadn't come all this way to be driven off by a skeptical foreman or a few hostile cowboys. Cole nodded, satisfied. "Good. Welcome to the Double Creek Ranch, Catherine Hayes. Let's see what you're made of." After he left, Catherine sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. Her hands were trembling, adrenaline and exhaustion catching up with her all at once. She had done it. She had actually found work on a cattle ranch in Wyoming Territory, something that would have been unthinkable just a month ago when she'd been trapped in her old life. And Cole Garrett, a cowboy who barely knew her, had given her a chance when everyone else, including the ranch owner, had been ready to dismiss her. She thought about the way he'd looked at her in the saloon, steady and considering, as if he was seeing past her small frame to something deeper. She thought about his quiet defense of her, the way he'd stood up to both his employer and the foreman without hesitation. There was something about him that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in years, and that terrified her almost as much as it comforted her. Catherine stood and unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the small closet and arranging her brush, mirror, and other necessities on the dresser. She had a book of poetry her mother had given her, a packet of letters from her childhood friend, and a small daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. These were all the treasures she possessed, all the pieces of her past she'd chosen to carry into her future. When everything was put away, Catherine changed from her traveling dress into her oldest, most practical work dress, a faded blue cotton that had seen better days. She braided her hair, a thick rope of chestnut brown that reached to her waist, and pinned it up securely. Then she washed her face and hands at the basin on the dresser, studying her reflection in the mirror. She looked tired, her green eyes shadowed with fatigue, but there was determination in her expression too. She was going to make this work. She had to. The sun was setting when Catherine made her way to the bunkhouse, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed to set the whole world on fire. The bunkhouse was a long, low building, with light spilling from its windows and the sound of male voices and laughter drifting out into the evening air. Catherine's steps slowed as she approached, but she forced herself to keep walking. This was part of the job, part of her new life, and she wouldn't let fear hold her back. She knocked on the door, and the conversation inside died instantly. Cole opened the door, his expression welcoming despite the sudden tension in the air behind him. "Come on in, Catherine. Supper's just about ready." The bunkhouse interior was dominated by a long table, flanked by rough benches, with bunks lining the walls and a pot-bellied stove at one end, where a pot of something that smelled delicious simmered away. 8 men sat around the table, ranging in age from barely 20 to well past 50. All of them staring at Catherine with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and in one case, outright hostility. Dutch sat at the head of the table, his arms crossed over his chest and his expression stormy. James Thornton sat beside him, looking resigned. The other men Catherine didn't know, but she could read their faces well enough. They didn't think she belonged here any more than Dutch did. "Everyone, this is Catherine Hayes," Cole said, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder in a gesture of support that sent warmth spreading through her. "She's joining the crew for the summer. Catherine, that's Dutch you already met, and that's James. The ugly one on the left is Tom. Beside him is Sam, then Hank, Roy, Miguel, and the youngster at the end is Billy." Tom, a thick-shouldered man with a beard like a bramble bush, grunted something that might have been a greeting. Sam, rail-thin with nervous eyes, nodded politely. Hank and Roy, clearly brothers with the same red hair and freckled faces, exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Miguel, dark-haired and handsome, smiled slightly, the first genuinely friendly expression Catherine had received besides Cole's. Billy, who couldn't have been more than 18 or 19, just gaped at her like she was a 2-headed calf. "Ma'am," Miguel said, his accent flavoring the word. "Welcome to Double Creek." "Thank you," Catherine said, grateful for the courtesy. "Let's eat," Cole said, guiding Catherine to a seat beside him on the bench. "You must be starving after that stage ride." The meal was beef stew, thick with vegetables, accompanied by fresh bread and strong coffee. It was simple but good, and Catherine ate hungrily, aware of the eyes on her, but determined not to let it affect her. Conversation gradually resumed around the table, though it was more subdued than before, the men clearly uncertain how to act with a woman in their midst. "So, what exactly are you planning to have her do, Cole?" Dutch asked finally, his tone making it clear he thought the entire situation was absurd. "Same as everyone else," Cole said, mopping up stew with a piece of bread. "She'll learn to ride, learn to rope, help with fence repairs, whatever needs doing. Plus, she'll take over cooking and cleaning in the main house, which will free up time for the rest of us." "She can't ride?" Dutch said, pouncing on the admission. "She doesn't know the first thing about ranch work, and you expect her to just pick it up? Cole, you're smarter than this." "Everyone starts somewhere," Cole said, his voice patient but firm. "You didn't know how to ride when you were born, Dutch. Someone taught you. I'll teach Catherine." "Teaching takes time, and time is money on a working ranch," Dutch shot back. "We've got work to do, not babysitting." "I said I'll handle it," Cole said, and this time there was steel in his voice, the tone of a man who had made his decision and wouldn't be swayed. It's not up for debate. Dutch's jaw worked, and for a moment, Catherine thought he might push the issue. Then he shook his head and returned his attention to his meal, radiating disapproval from every pore. The other men avoided looking at either Cole or Catherine, suddenly very interested in their food. After supper, Catherine offered to help clean up, but Cole shook his head. "Tom's on dishes tonight. You've had a long day. Get some rest and be ready at dawn tomorrow. We start early out here." "How early?" Catherine asked. "First light," Cole said. 5 o'clock or thereabouts. Dress in your oldest clothes, something you don't mind getting dirty or torn. And if you've got boots, wear them. If not, we'll find you a pair. Catherine did have boots, sturdy leather ones she'd worn in the mill. "I'll be ready." She bid everyone good night and stepped out into the cool evening air. The sky was fully dark now, stars beginning to emerge in clusters so thick it looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. Catherine had never seen so many stars, not in the smoke and haze of Philadelphia. She stood for a moment, just looking up, feeling small in a way that had nothing to do with her physical stature and everything to do with the vastness of the world she'd entered. "Impressive, isn't it?" Catherine jumped, pressing a hand to her racing heart. Cole had followed her out, his footsteps silent on the packed earth. "You startled me." "Sorry," he said, moving to stand beside her. "First time seeing a Wyoming sky?" "First time seeing any sky like this," Catherine said. "In the city, you can barely see the stars at all, but this is like nothing I've ever imagined." Cole tilted his head back, following her gaze. "It's one of the things I love most about this country. Makes you realize how small we all are, how the things we worry about don't amount to much in the grand scheme. But it makes you feel connected too, like you're part of something bigger than yourself." Catherine looked at him, at the strong lines of his profile silhouetted against the starlight. "You're a poet, Cole Garrett." He laughed, a warm sound that made something flutter in her chest. "I'm a cowboy who reads too much when he should be sleeping. There's a difference." He sobered slightly, turning to face her. "Listen, I want you to know what you're getting into. Dutch isn't going to make this easy, and some of the men will take their cue from him. You're going to have to work twice as hard as anyone else just to prove you deserve to be here, and even then, some of them might never accept you. If you want to change your mind, go back to Laramie tomorrow. There's no shame in it." "I'm not going back," Catherine said firmly. "I didn't come all this way to quit at the first sign of difficulty. I need this job, Cole. I need this chance." "Why?" he asked softly. "What are you running from, Catherine Hayes?" The question hung between them, weighted with genuine concern rather than judgment. Catherine considered deflecting, keeping her secrets close as she had learned to do over the years. But something about Cole's steady presence, his honest eyes and open expression, made her want to trust him with the truth. "A man back in Philadelphia," she said finally. "Robert Langston. He was a friend of my father's, a merchant with money and connections. After my mother died and my father got into debt, Langston offered to help, but his price was that I marry him. He's 53 years old, and he made it clear that if I refused, he'd ruin my father completely. When my father died anyway, his heart giving out from the stress, Langston still thought he had a claim on me. He told people we were engaged, started planning a wedding I'd never agreed to. I realized that if I stayed, I'd end up Mrs. Robert Langston whether I wanted to be or not. So I took what little money I had and left." Cole's expression had darkened as she spoke, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "That's not a proposal, that's coercion. You did the right thing getting out." "I hope so," Catherine said quietly. "Sometimes I wonder if I was just being selfish, running away from responsibility. Langston could have given me a comfortable life." "A comfortable cage is still a cage," Cole said. "And from what you've told me, it sounds like he wanted to own you, not partner with you. That's no way to live." He paused, then added, "You're safe here, Catherine. Langston doesn't know where you are, and even if he did, he'd have to get through me to get to you, and I promise you that's not going to happen." The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent a shiver down Catherine's spine, but it wasn't fear she felt. It was something warmer, something that settled in her chest and made her feel less alone than she had in months. "Thank you," she whispered. "Nothing to thank me for," Cole said. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Catherine lay awake that night in her small room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her. Horses nickered in the corrals, cattle lowed in the distance, and the wind sighed through the eaves. She thought about Cole's promise to protect her, about the way he'd stood up for her without hesitation. She thought about his quiet strength, his kindness, the way he seemed to see her as a person rather than just a problem to be solved or an obstacle to be overcome. She had only known him for a few hours, but already Catherine felt drawn to him in a way that both excited and frightened her. She had never had much time for romance, her life too consumed by work and worry. But lying there in the darkness, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Cole's eyes crinkled when he smiled, the warmth of his hand on her shoulder, the steady confidence he carried like a shield against the world's harshness. "Don't be foolish," she told herself sternly. "He's just being kind because he feels sorry for you. He probably helps every stray that crosses his path. Don't read more into it than what's there." But as Catherine finally drifted off to sleep, her last thought was of Cole's face in the starlight, and she fell asleep with a smile on her lips. True to his word, Cole knocked on her door just as the eastern sky was beginning to lighten from black to gray. Catherine was already dressed, her hair braided and pinned up, her oldest work dress covered by the apron she'd brought from Philadelphia. She'd barely slept, too nervous and excited about her first day of real ranch work. "Ready?" Cole asked when she opened the door. "Ready," Catherine confirmed. They walked together through the pre-dawn darkness to the barn, where Cole lit a lantern and led her down a row of stalls. Horses stirred at their approach, soft whickers and the sound of hooves on straw filling the quiet morning. Cole stopped at a stall near the end, where a gray mare with a gentle eye watched them approach. "This is Sage," Cole said, unlatching the stall door. "She's 15 years old, steady as they come, and she doesn't spook easy. She'll be your horse while you're here." Catherine reached out tentatively, and Sage lowered her head to snuffle at her palm, whiskers tickling her skin. "She's beautiful. She's patient, which is what matters most for learning," Cole said. He showed Catherine how to approach the horse properly, how to speak softly and move confidently without startling her. Then he taught her how to brush Sage's coat, how to pick out her hooves, checking for stones or injuries. Catherine listened intently, committing every detail to memory. When Sage was groomed, Cole brought out a saddle and demonstrated how to position it, how to tighten the cinch, how to check that everything was secure. "A lot of accidents happen because of improperly secured tack," he explained. "Always double-check before you mount, no matter how experienced you get." Catherine practiced under his watchful eye, her arms straining with the weight of the saddle. It was heavier than she'd expected, and she struggled to lift it high enough to settle it properly on Sage's back. Cole didn't take over, though she could tell he wanted to. Instead, he talked her through it, offering suggestions and encouragement until she managed it on her own. "Good," he said, approval warming his voice. "Now let's get you mounted." Catherine had ridden exactly twice in her life, both times as a child on a pony at a fair. Swinging up onto Sage's back felt impossibly high, and she had to try 3 times before she managed to get her foot in the stirrup and pull herself up. Once seated, the ground seemed very far away, and she clutched the saddle horn with both hands. Cole adjusted her stirrups, his hands impersonal but gentle as he ensured they were the right length. "Heels down, back straight, shoulders over your hips. You want to move with the horse, not fight against her. Sage knows what she's doing, so trust her." He saddled his own horse, a tall bay gelding named Ranger, and swung up with an ease that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. Then he led Catherine out of the barn and into the pale light of dawn, heading toward the open pasture beyond the corrals. For the next 2 hours, Cole taught Catherine the basics of riding, how to steer using the reins in her legs, how to ask for a walk and a trot, how to sit the different gaits without bouncing around like a sack of potatoes. It was harder than she'd expected, her legs and back screaming with the unfamiliar effort, but Catherine gritted her teeth and pushed through. Every time she started to feel overwhelmed, Cole was there with a word of encouragement or a helpful correction, his patience seemingly endless. By the time the sun had fully cleared the horizon, Catherine could walk Sage in a reasonably straight line and execute clumsy turns without yanking on the reins. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and Cole told her so with genuine pride in his voice. "You're a natural," he said as they walked the horses back toward the barn. "Most people take a lot longer to get comfortable in the saddle." Catherine's entire body ached, muscles she didn't know she had, protesting every movement, but she couldn't stop smiling. "I think you're just a good teacher." "Maybe a little of both," Cole said with a grin. They unsaddled and groomed the horses, then headed to the bunkhouse for breakfast. The other men were already there, digging into plates piled with eggs, bacon, and fried potatoes. Dutch looked up as they entered, his expression sour. "Enjoy your riding lesson?" he asked, the question clearly a barb. "She did fine," Cole said, guiding Catherine to a seat and filling a plate for her. "She'll be riding out with us in a few days." "Riding out where?" Dutch demanded. "Cole, we're pushing the herd to the north pasture today. That's not beginner work." "I know that," Cole said calmly. "That's why I said a few days, not today. She'll stay here, work on the house, practice her riding in the afternoon. By the end of the week, she'll be ready for easy work." "And who's going to supervise her practice?" Dutch pressed. "You'll be with the herd." "Miguel can do it," Cole said, glancing at the dark-haired cowboy. "You don't mind, do you?" Miguel shook his head. "Not at all. It would be my pleasure to help the lady." Dutch opened his mouth to argue further, but James Thornton cut him off. "That's settled then. Dutch, let's get the men moving. We've got a long day ahead of us." After breakfast, the men headed out in a group, horses loaded with supplies and coiled ropes hanging from their saddles. Cole lingered for a moment, catching Catherine's eye. "You all right?" "I'm fine," Catherine assured him, though in truth, she already felt exhausted and the day had barely begun. "Go on. I'll see you this evening." She watched him ride out with the others, his broad shoulders swaying easily with Ranger's gait. Then she turned toward the main house, rolling up her sleeves. Time to earn her keep. The main house was even more neglected inside than Catherine had initially realized. Dust covered every surface, dishes were piled in the kitchen, and the floors hadn't seen a proper scrubbing in what looked like months. Catherine set to work with determination, heating water on the stove, scrubbing pots and pans, wiping down counters and shelves. She swept and mopped the floors, beat the dust from the rugs, washed the windows until they sparkled. By midday, the main room and kitchen were transformed. Sunlight streamed through clean glass, reflecting off polished wood and gleaming surfaces. Catherine stood in the center of the room, hands on her aching hips, and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. This was work she knew, work she was good at, and she'd done it well. She made herself a simple lunch of bread and cheese, then headed outside to find Miguel. He was working in one of the corrals, training a young horse on a long lead line. He looked up as she approached, his smile friendly and open. "You are ready to ride again?" he asked. "If you have time to help me," Catherine said. "I don't want to interrupt your work." Miguel waved off her concern. "Cole asked me to help you, so that is my work today. Come, we will saddle Sage and work in the pasture where there is room to move." Miguel proved to be as patient a teacher as Cole, though his approach was different. Where Cole was methodical and thorough, Miguel was intuitive and encouraging, teaching Catherine to feel the horse's movements rather than overthink them. Under his guidance, Catherine's confidence grew, and by the end of the afternoon, she could trot without clinging to the saddle horn. "You have good balance," Miguel told her as they cooled down the horses. "Many people fight the horse, try to control too much, but you listen to what Sage is telling you. That is the most important thing." "Thank you for helping me," Catherine said sincerely. "I know you have other things you could be doing." "I am happy to help," Miguel said. "Besides, it is nice to have someone new to talk to. The same men, day after day, their conversation becomes boring, yes?" He grinned, and Catherine found herself laughing. Over the next several days, Catherine fell into a routine. She woke before dawn, helped Cole with the barn chores, then spent her mornings cleaning and maintaining the main house. She cooked proper meals for James Thornton, who was pathetically grateful for food that wasn't burned or half raw. In the afternoons, she practiced riding with either Miguel or, when the crew was working near the ranch, Cole. In the evenings, she fell into bed exhausted but satisfied, her body slowly adapting to the physical demands of ranch life. Dutch remained openly hostile, making snide comments about wasted resources and questioning every decision Cole made regarding Catherine's training. But the other men slowly warmed to her, especially after she started cooking for the entire crew, turning out meals that were vastly superior to their usual fare. Tom admitted grudgingly that she made the best biscuits he'd ever tasted. Sam taught her how to recognize different cattle brands. Even Hank and Roy, the skeptical brothers, started offering her friendly greetings. But it was Cole who occupied most of Catherine's thoughts. She found herself watching for him throughout the day, feeling a little thrill every time she spotted him riding in from the range. He checked on her progress constantly, offering praise and gentle corrections, never making her feel foolish or inadequate. In the evenings after supper, they often sat on the porch of the main house, talking until the stars came out. Cole told her about his childhood in Colorado, growing up on his father's ranch until his mother died, and his father sold everything and moved east, unable to bear the memories. Cole had stayed in the West, working his way from ranch to ranch, learning everything he could about cattle and horses. He'd been at the Double Creek for 3 years now, and James Thornton had already told him that one day, if he wanted it, he could buy a partnership in the ranch. Catherine shared stories of her own life, the long hours in the textile mill, the gradual decline of her family's fortunes as her father tried and failed to compete with larger businesses. She told Cole about her mother, a gentle woman with a gift for music who had wasted away slowly from consumption. She told him about the suffocating expectations of Philadelphia society, the way women were meant to be decorative and obedient rather than strong and independent. "You would have hated it there," Catherine said one evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "Everything is about appearances, about what people think. No one says what they really mean, and everyone is judging everyone else all the time." "Sounds exhausting," Cole said. He was whittling a piece of wood, his hands steady and sure as he carved. "Out here, you say what you mean, and you mean what you say. Life's too hard for games." "That's what I love about it," Catherine said softly. "Everything is real here. The work is real. The land is real. Even the hardships are honest. No one is pretending to be something they're not." Cole looked up from his carving, his eyes meeting hers in the fading light. "Are you happy here, Catherine? Truly happy?" "I think I'm starting to be," she said, her heart beating faster under the intensity of his gaze. "Happier than I've been in a long time." Something shifted in Cole's expression, a warmth kindling in his eyes that made Catherine's breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might say something more, might close the distance between them on the porch swing, but then voices drifted from the bunkhouse, someone calling for Cole, and the moment passed. Cole stood, pocketing his carving, and offered Catherine a slightly rueful smile. "I should go see what they need," he said. "Sleep well, Catherine." "Good night, Cole," she whispered, watching him walk away into the gathering darkness. 2 weeks into Catherine's time at the Double Creek, Dutch decided to put her to a real test. The crew was working on repairing a fence line in the east pasture, and over breakfast, Dutch announced that Catherine would be joining them. "If she's going to be part of this crew, she needs to do real work," Dutch said, his eyes hard as flint. "Riding around in circles in a pasture isn't going to cut it. Time to see what she's actually made of." Cole started to object, but Catherine cut him off. "I'll go," she said firmly. "You're right, Dutch. It's time I pulled my weight." Cole looked at her, concern etched in his features, but he nodded slowly. "All right, but you stay close to me, understand? Fence work is dangerous if you don't know what you're doing." The ride to the east pasture took over an hour, and by the time they arrived, Catherine's legs were aching from gripping the saddle, but she slid down from Sage without complaint, tethering the horse with the others and joining the men as they surveyed the damaged fence. A section about 20 yards long had been knocked down, posts broken and wire tangled where cattle had pushed through. Dutch started barking orders, assigning men to different tasks. To Catherine, he said, "You're on wire. Get those tangles sorted out and coiled for reuse." Wire work was some of the hardest and most dangerous fence work, as Catherine quickly discovered. The barbed wire was vicious, grabbing at her gloves and clothes, leaving bloody scratches wherever it touched bare skin. The coils were heavy and awkward, fighting her every attempt to organize them. Within 10 minutes, Catherine's hands were torn and bleeding. Despite the thick gloves Cole had given her, her dress was ripped in 3 places, and sweat was pouring down her face in the climbing heat. Dutch watched her struggle with undisguised satisfaction, making no move to help or offer advice. The other men worked on setting new posts and stretching fresh wire, occasionally glancing her way, but following Dutch's lead and leaving her to manage on her own. Only Cole hovered nearby, his jaw tight with barely suppressed anger. "Let me help you," he said finally, moving toward her. "No," Catherine said through gritted teeth. "Dutch gave me this job, and I'm going to finish it." "Catherine, you're bleeding," Cole protested. "I'll live," she said, wrestling another tangle free. "I'm not going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me quit." It took Catherine 3 hours to sort and coil all the damaged wire, her hands screaming with pain, her back and shoulders burning with fatigue. But she finished it, every last piece accounted for and ready for disposal or reuse. When she finally straightened, she found all the men watching her. Dutch's expression was unreadable, but Cole looked furious. "Done," Catherine announced, her voice steady despite the exhaustion threatening to buckle her knees. "What's next?" Dutch studied her for a long moment, taking in her torn dress, her bloody hands, the stubborn set of her chin. Then, slowly, something changed in his face. It wasn't quite respect, not yet, but it was no longer open hostility either. "Next is lunch," he said gruffly. "Then we stretch the new wire. You can handle a fence stretcher?" "Show me how, and I will," Catherine said. Over lunch, which Catherine forced herself to eat despite having no appetite, Miguel cleaned and bandaged her hands while Cole sat beside her, radiating protective anger. "You should have let me help," he said quietly. "I couldn't," Catherine replied. "Don't you see? If you'd helped me, it would have confirmed everything Dutch thinks about me, that I can't do the work, that I need special treatment, that I don't belong here. I had to prove I could handle it on my own." "You proved that and more," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. "Catherine, you shouldn't have to hurt yourself to earn respect." "Sometimes that's what it takes," Catherine said, meeting his eyes. "You of all people should understand that. How many times did you have to prove yourself when you were starting out?" Cole looked away, his jaw working. "That was different." "How?" Catherine challenged. "Because you're a man? The work is the same, Cole. The expectation should be the same too." He didn't have an answer for that, and after a moment, he just shook his head and handed her his canteen. "Drink. You need to stay hydrated in this heat." The afternoon was more of the same brutal work, but Catherine stuck with it, refusing to show weakness even when her hands cramped and bled through the bandages. She learned how to use the fence stretcher, a wicked tool that required all her weight and strength to operate. She learned how to staple wire to posts, how to check tension, how to ensure each section was secure enough to hold back determined cattle. By the time they finished and headed back to the ranch, the sun was setting and Catherine was swaying in the saddle with exhaustion. She barely remembered dismounting, barely registered Cole taking care of Sage, while Miguel practically carried her to the main house. She climbed the stairs to her room on willpower alone, collapsed on her bed fully clothed, and knew nothing more until morning. She woke to find her hands swollen and throbbing, every muscle in her body screaming protest. For a long moment, Catherine just lay there, wondering if she could physically get out of bed. Then she heard a soft knock on her door, and Cole's voice calling her name. "Catherine, are you awake?" She forced herself upright, biting back a groan. "I'm awake. Come in." Cole entered carrying a tray with breakfast and a basin of steaming water. His expression was tight with concern as he set everything on the dresser and turned to look at her. "How do you feel?" "Like I was trampled by a herd of cattle," Catherine admitted. "But I'm all right." "You're not all right," Cole said flatly. "Let me see your hands." Catherine held them out, and Cole sucked in a sharp breath at the sight of the torn, swollen skin. Gently, he unwrapped Miguel's bandages, cleaned each wound with water from the basin, and applied fresh ointment before rewrapping everything with clean cloth. His hands were infinitely gentle, and when Catherine hissed at a particularly painful spot, he murmured an apology. "You don't have to do this," Catherine said softly, watching him work. "I want to," Cole said, not looking up. "Catherine, what you did yesterday was brave. Stubborn as hell, but brave. Dutch knows it too. He said as much after you went to bed last night." "He did?" Catherine couldn't hide her surprise. Cole nodded, finishing with her hands and finally meeting her eyes. "He said anyone, man or woman, who could work through what you went through yesterday without complaining has earned their place on this crew. It's not a complete turnaround, but it's progress." Warmth bloomed in Catherine's chest, not just from Dutch's grudging approval, but from the pride she saw shining in Cole's eyes. "I couldn't have done it without knowing you believed in me," she said quietly. "You gave me the chance when no one else would. You gave me the confidence to believe I could do this." Cole reached up, his fingertips brushing her cheek so gently she might have imagined it. "You did this yourself, Catherine. All I did was open a door. You're the one who walked through it." They stayed like that for a heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, the air between them crackling with something neither was quite ready to name. Then Cole cleared his throat and stood, stepping back. "Eat your breakfast and take the morning easy. Your hands need time to heal. I'll come get you this afternoon for a gentle ride, just to keep you from stiffening up completely." After he left, Catherine ate mechanically, her mind spinning. She was falling for Cole Garrett, falling hard and fast in a way that terrified her. She had sworn off men and romance after fleeing Robert Langston, had promised herself she'd focus only on survival and independence. But Cole was nothing like Langston. Where Langston had been controlling and entitled, Cole was respectful and supportive. Where Langston had tried to cage her, Cole was helping her fly. And unless she was very much mistaken, Cole was developing feelings for her too. She saw it in the way he looked at her, heard it in his voice when he spoke to her, felt it in every gentle touch and protective gesture. They were dancing around something neither had acknowledged aloud, and Catherine didn't know whether she wanted to rush toward it or run away. Over the following weeks, Catherine continued to prove herself. She learned to rope, though her throws were often clumsy and imprecise. She learned to recognize when cattle were sick or injured, how to separate one cow from the herd, how to read the weather by watching the sky and the animal's behavior. Her hands healed into calluses, her body grew lean and strong from the constant physical labor, and her riding improved until she could keep up with the men on all but the most demanding work. Dutch never became warm exactly, but he stopped undermining her and started including her in crew decisions. Tom taught her how to play poker during evening downtime, and she won more often than she lost, much to the men's chagrin. Sam showed her how to identify edible plants on the range. Billy followed her around like a puppy whenever she was near, earning endless teasing from the other hands. But it was with Cole that Catherine felt most herself. They fell into an easy companionship that felt as natural as breathing, working together during the day and talking for hours in the evenings. Cole continued to teach her, but it was a partnership now, rather than just instruction. Catherine showed Cole her skills too, mending his torn shirts with neat, invisible stitches, helping him with the ranch accounts when James's eyes grew too tired to focus on the numbers, making his favorite meals when she knew he'd had a particularly hard day. She learned that Cole liked his coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, that he was left-handed, that he had a beautiful singing voice he only used when he thought no one was listening. She learned that he'd once broken his arm in 3 places when a horse threw him, that he was afraid of nothing except letting down people who depended on him, that he wanted someday to have his own ranch and a family to share it with. And Cole learned about Catherine too. He discovered that she was fiercely competitive and hated losing at anything, that she had a sharp sense of humor and a wicked talent for mimicry that could have the entire crew howling with laughter, that she was terrified of storms, a leftover from a tornado that had struck near her childhood home, that despite everything she'd been through, she still believed in goodness and hope and the possibility of building something beautiful from broken pieces. One evening in late August, as summer was beginning its slow slide toward autumn, Catherine and Cole sat on the porch watching heat lightning flicker on the horizon. They had been working together all day, moving a small herd to fresh grazing, and they were both pleasantly tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from good work well done. "I've been thinking," Cole said, breaking a comfortable silence. "James has been talking about expanding the ranch, maybe bringing on a partner to help with the investment and the work. I've got some money saved, and I'm considering making him an offer." "That's wonderful," Catherine said, genuinely happy for him. "You'd be part owner of the Double Creek. That's what you wanted, isn't it?" "It is," Cole agreed. "But it would mean being tied here permanently, making a real commitment to this place and this life. And before I do that, I need to know something." He turned to face her, and even in the dim light from the windows, Catherine could see the intensity in his eyes, the nervousness in the set of his shoulders. Her heart began to pound. "I need to know if you're planning to stay," Cole said quietly. "Because, Catherine, these past 2 months with you here have been the best of my life. You make me laugh. You challenge me to be better. You make every day brighter just by being in it. And I've realized that I don't want a future that doesn't have you in it." Catherine's breath caught in her throat. "Cole, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm falling in love with you," Cole said, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them back too long. "Maybe I've been falling since the moment you walked into that saloon and refused to back down from Dutch. You're the bravest, strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever met. And if there's any chance you might feel the same way, I need to know. Because if you're going to leave at the end of summer, if this was only ever temporary for you, I need to prepare myself for that. But if there's a chance you might stay, if there's a chance you might want to build a life here with me, then that changes everything." Tears pricked at Catherine's eyes, happiness and fear warring in her chest. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I have been for weeks, but I was afraid to hope that you might feel the same. Cole, I was so broken when I came here. I didn't think I'd ever be able to trust anyone again, let alone trust them with my heart. But you've shown me what it means to be seen and valued for who I really am, not what someone wants me to be. You've given me back my strength and my courage, and yes, I want to stay. I want to build a life here, with you, if you'll have me." Cole closed the distance between them in one swift movement, his hands cupping her face as he kissed her. It was gentle and fierce all at once, a kiss full of promise and hope and all the feelings they'd been dancing around for weeks. Catherine melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him back with everything in her heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said, the words somewhere between a question and a declaration. "I know it's fast. I know we should probably wait, but I'm sure about you, Catherine. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "Yes," Catherine said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you." Cole kissed her again, and this time there was joy in it, pure and uncomplicated, the joy of two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen to bet their futures on that finding. They were married 6 weeks later in early October, when the aspens had turned gold and the air carried the first hint of winter's approach. The ceremony took place at the ranch, with James Thornton standing up as Cole's best man and all the ranch hands in attendance. Even Dutch cracked a smile when Cole kissed his bride, and Miguel played guitar, while Tom sang in a surprisingly beautiful tenor voice. Catherine wore a simple dress she'd sewn herself from cream-colored wool, with wildflowers in her hair, and Cole's mother's ring on her finger, a delicate gold band Cole had kept for years, waiting for the right woman. Cole wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face as they spoke their vows. "I promise to honor you as my partner and my equal," Cole said, his voice steady and clear. "I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to value your strength and support you when you need it, to love you with everything I am for as long as I live. I promise to build this life with you," Catherine said, her own voice thick with emotion, "to work beside you, to trust you with my heart, to face every challenge as a team. I promise to love you fiercely and freely, today and always." When the circuit preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the crew erupted in cheers and whistles. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and more food than Catherine had prepared in her entire time at the ranch. She danced with Cole under the stars, his arms strong around her, his smile brighter than the moon overhead. "Happy?" he murmured in her ear. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Catherine said truthfully. "Thank you for believing in me, Cole, for giving me the chance to become who I was meant to be." "Thank you for taking that chance," Cole said, pulling her closer. "For being brave enough to start over, for not giving up even when it was hard. You've made me believe in possibilities I'd stopped dreaming about." Cole and Catherine moved into a small cabin on the ranch property, one of the old line shacks that Cole and the crew had spent the past month renovating. It was modest but cozy, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, a bedroom, and a loft that could eventually become a nursery. Catherine made curtains for the windows and rugs for the floors, while Cole built furniture in the evenings, his hands creating beautiful things from rough timber. True to his plan, Cole bought a quarter partnership in the Double Creek Ranch, investing his savings alongside a commitment to manage the day-to-day operations with Dutch. James was getting older and was grateful to have reliable help securing the ranch's future. The arrangement gave Cole and Catherine financial stability and a real stake in the land they worked. Catherine continued to work the ranch alongside the men, though as fall deepened into winter, her role shifted somewhat. The heavy outdoor work became difficult in the snow and ice, so she focused more on managing the ranch accounts, organizing supplies, and maintaining the main house. But she still rode out when weather permitted, still helped with calving when spring came, still proved herself again and again to be as capable as any hand on the payroll. Dutch, in one of his rare moments of openness, told her one evening that she'd earned his respect completely. "I was wrong about you," he said gruffly, looking embarrassed by the admission. "You're tougher than most men I've known, and you've got more heart than all of them combined. Cole's lucky to have you." "We're lucky to have each other," Catherine said, touched by the foreman's words. "And thank you, Dutch, for giving me a chance to prove you wrong." Didn't give you anything, Dutch said with a hint of his old gruffness. You took it, same as you took everything else. That's what makes you different. As winter settled over the ranch in earnest, Catherine and Cole discovered the rhythms of married life. They learned each other's habits and quirks, the small accommodations and compromises that turned two individuals into a partnership. Catherine learned that Cole was grumpy in the mornings until he'd had coffee, that he worried obsessively about the horses during storms, that he had nightmares sometimes about his mother's death. Cole learned that Catherine hoarded books like treasure, that she sang while she cooked, that she needed reassurance sometimes, that she was enough, that her past didn't define her. They had their first real fight in December, when Cole wanted to buy more breeding stock and Catherine argued they should save the money for emergencies. It was a bitter argument, voices raised and feelings hurt, ending with Cole storming out to the barn and Catherine retreating to the bedroom in tears. But they couldn't stay angry with each other for long, and by evening they had talked it through, compromising on a smaller purchase and a larger savings cushion. They went to bed reconciled, holding each other close, and Catherine realized that even their fights proved how strong their foundation was. They could disagree without destroying what they had built. Spring came with its usual chaos of calving and branding, and Catherine was in the thick of it, helping with difficult births, nursing weak calves, working hours that stretched from pre-dawn to after dark. She fell into bed exhausted every night, often asleep before her head hit the pillow. But she was happy, truly happy, in a way that still surprised her sometimes. This was the life she'd dreamed of without knowing it. Work that mattered, and a partner who valued her. A place where she belonged completely. In May, Catherine realized she'd missed her monthly courses. At first, she attributed it to stress and hard work. But when June came and went with the same result, she could no longer ignore the possibility. She rode into Laramie on the pretense of ordering supplies and visited the doctor's wife, who confirmed what Catherine had already suspected. She was pregnant, due sometime in late January. Catherine sat in the woman's parlor for a long time after receiving the news, her hands pressed to her stomach, emotions swirling through her like a spring storm. She was thrilled, terrified, excited, and anxious all at once. She and Cole had talked about children, but in the abstract way of people who assumed they had plenty of time. Now the reality was immediate and undeniable. She was going to be a mother. She and Cole were going to have a baby. When she returned to the ranch that evening, she found Cole in the barn tending to a mare with a stone bruise. He looked up as she entered, his face breaking into a smile that still made her heart flutter, even after months of marriage. "How was town?" he asked, setting down the horse's hoof and straightening. "Productive," Catherine said, her voice quavering slightly. "Cole, I need to tell you something." His smile faded, replaced by immediate concern. "What's wrong? Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Catherine said quickly. "Better than fine, actually. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Cole just stared at her, his expression frozen in shock. Then his face transformed, joy dawning like sunrise, and he crossed the space between them in 2 long strides. He swept Catherine into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, laughing with pure happiness. "We're having a baby," he repeated, as if needing to hear the words again to believe them. "Catherine, that's incredible. You're incredible. When? Are you feeling all right? Do you need to sit down? Should you even be riding?" Catherine laughed at his sudden nervousness, cupping his face in her hands. "I'm due in late January. I feel fine, just a little tired sometimes. And yes, I can still ride, at least for now. The doctor's wife said everything looks normal." "January," Cole said, setting her down gently but keeping his arms around her. "That's going to be right in the middle of winter. We'll need to make sure we're prepared, stock up on supplies in case we get snowed in, and we'll need to get the loft finished, make it a proper nursery, and we should probably—" "Cole," Catherine interrupted, laughing. "Breathe. We have months to prepare. Right now, let's just be happy about it." Cole took a deep breath, then kissed her, soft and sweet and full of wonder. "I'm so happy I can barely stand it," he murmured against her lips. "I love you so much, Catherine, and I'm going to love our child just as much." "I love you too," Catherine whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I can't wait to meet our baby." Word of the pregnancy spread through the ranch crew quickly, and Catherine found herself on the receiving end of endless advice, concern, and unexpected gentleness from men who made their living through toughness. Dutch insisted she stop doing any heavy lifting immediately. Tom started leaving little carved toys on her doorstep, animals he'd whittled in the evenings. Miguel taught her a Spanish lullaby his own mother had sung to him. Even Billy, still barely more than a boy himself, became fiercely protective, hovering whenever Catherine was working outside. Cole became almost comically overprotective as Catherine's pregnancy progressed through summer into fall. He worried constantly about her overworking, insisted she rest more than she wanted to, and nearly drove her to distraction with his concern. But Catherine understood it came from love and fear of losing what he held most precious. So she tolerated it with good humor, even as she continued to do most of her normal work. By November, Catherine's condition was obvious, her body rounding with the growing child. She'd had to let out all her dresses and eventually give up riding entirely, much as it frustrated her. She spent her days managing the ranch paperwork, cooking, sewing tiny clothes for the baby, and preparing the nursery with Cole. He'd built a beautiful cradle from pine, smooth and sturdy, and Catherine had made bedding and curtains in cheerful yellow. Winter arrived early that year, snow falling heavily in mid-December, and continuing through the holidays. Catherine and Cole celebrated a quiet Christmas in their cabin, just the two of them, exchanging simple gifts and dreaming about the following year when they'd have a child to share the holiday with. "What do you want to name the baby?" Cole asked, his hand resting on Catherine's swollen belly, where their child kicked and turned. "I don't know," Catherine admitted. "I've been thinking about it, but nothing feels quite right. What about you?" "If it's a boy, I'd like to name him Joseph, after my father," Cole said. "And if it's a girl, maybe Rose, for my mother. But only if you agree. I want us to decide together." "Joseph Garrett," Catherine said, testing the name. "I like that, and Rose is beautiful. But let's wait and see who they are before we decide for sure. Maybe they'll tell us their name when we meet them." Cole laughed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Maybe they will." Catherine's labor began on a bitter cold night in late January, 3 weeks before her calculated due date. The first pain woke her from sleep, a deep cramping that started in her back and wrapped around to her belly. She lay still for a moment, breathing through it, hoping it was false labor. But when a second pain came 20 minutes later, followed by a third, she knew this was the real thing. "Cole," she said, shaking his shoulder gently. "Cole, wake up. I think the baby's coming." Cole was awake instantly, going from dead sleep to full alertness in a heartbeat. "Are you sure? How far apart are the pains?" 20 minutes or so," Catherine said, gripping his hand as another contraction rolled through her. "But they're strong. I think we should get the doctor's wife from town." "I'll send Billy," Cole said, already moving to dress. "The roads are bad, but his horse is sure-footed. He'll get through, and I'll get Dutch to ride to the Thompsons' place. Mrs. Thompson has delivered half the babies in the county. She'll know what to do." The next hours blurred together in a haze of pain and effort. Mrs. Thompson arrived first, a capable woman in her 50s who took one look at Catherine and started issuing calm, confident orders. The doctor's wife arrived shortly after, and together they transformed the bedroom into a birthing room. Cole stayed beside Catherine the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, murmuring encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her into this situation. Labor was long and brutal, stretching through the night and into the following afternoon. Catherine had never experienced such pain, never imagined her body capable of this kind of work. But every time she thought she couldn't endure another moment, she looked at Cole's face, saw the love and fear and faith in his eyes, and found the strength to keep going. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, their baby entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the cabin. "It's a boy," Mrs. Thompson announced, laying the squalling infant on Catherine's chest. A big, healthy boy. Catherine looked down at her son, at his red, wrinkled face and shock of dark hair, and fell instantly, completely in love. Cole leaned over them both, tears streaming down his face, one finger gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "Hello, Joseph," Catherine whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Joseph Cole Garrett proved to be a demanding infant, with strong lungs and definite opinions about when he wanted to eat, sleep, or be held. Catherine was exhausted, her body recovering from the trauma of birth while adjusting to the relentless demands of a newborn. But she'd never been happier. Every time she looked at her son, every time Cole held the baby with such tenderness and wonder, she felt a completeness she hadn't known was possible. Cole was a devoted father from the start, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor at night when Joseph fussed, singing the baby to sleep in his beautiful baritone. The ranch crew doted on Joseph shamelessly, tough cowboys turning to mush when the baby was brought out for visits. Dutch carved Joseph a set of wooden blocks. Tom made him a toy horse. Miguel promised to teach him Spanish and guitar when he was old enough. As winter slowly gave way to spring and Joseph grew from a newborn into a chubby, smiling infant, Catherine reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. 2 years ago, she'd been trapped in Philadelphia, facing a future that filled her with dread. Now, she was a wife and mother, living on a working cattle ranch in Wyoming Territory, doing work she loved with people she respected. She thought sometimes about Robert Langston and wondered if he'd ever looked for her, if he'd been angry or relieved when she disappeared. She hoped he'd found someone else to torment with his controlling expectations. As for Catherine, she'd found freedom and purpose and a love so deep it sometimes overwhelmed her. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked one evening as they sat on the porch, Joseph sleeping peacefully in his cradle between them. "How lucky I am," Catherine said simply. "How one decision to board a train changed everything. If I hadn't seen that advertisement, if I hadn't been brave enough to answer it, I'd still be in Philadelphia, probably married to Langston and miserable. Instead, I'm here with you, with Joseph, living a life I didn't even know I wanted until I found it." "I'm the lucky one," Cole said, reaching over to lace his fingers through hers. "You walked into that saloon and changed my entire world, Catherine. You made me believe in partnership and possibility. You gave me a family. I wake up every morning grateful that you took a chance on this place. On me." "We took a chance on each other," Catherine corrected. "When Dutch said I was too small to work the ranch, you hired me anyway. You saw past my size to who I really was. You gave me the opportunity to prove him wrong, to prove to myself that I was stronger than I thought. Everything good in my life started with that one act of faith." Cole pulled her close, and they sat together in the gathering dusk, listening to their son's peaceful breathing and the familiar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. The future stretched before them, uncertain as all futures are, but they would face it together, as partners and equals, just as they'd promised on their wedding day. Joseph grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, curious and adventurous and utterly fearless. Catherine often found him in the barn trying to pet horses or attempting to climb fences, and she had to watch him constantly. But she loved seeing his personality emerge, loved watching Cole teach their son about ranching the way he'd taught her. When Joseph was 2, Catherine found herself pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. She gave birth in September to a daughter they named Rose Margaret, combining Cole's mother's name with Catherine's. Rose was quieter than her brother had been, with wispy blonde hair and blue-gray eyes like her father. The cabin was bursting at the seams with 2 children, so Cole and the crew spent that winter building a proper house, a 4-bedroom structure with a real parlor and a kitchen big enough for Catherine to work comfortably. They moved in the following spring, and Catherine cried as she arranged their furniture and hung curtains, overwhelmed by the solidity of it, the permanence. This was their home, truly and completely, built by their own hands to shelter their growing family. Over the years that followed, Catherine and Cole built a life of substance and meaning. The ranch prospered under their management, the herd growing, their reputation for quality cattle spreading throughout the territory. Catherine became known as one of the best ropers in the county, her small size an advantage in handling nimble horses and quick cattle. She'd long since proved Dutch wrong, proved everyone wrong, but she no longer needed external validation. She knew her own worth. Dutch retired eventually, his old bones no longer able to handle the hard work, and Cole took over as foreman while Catherine managed the business side of the ranch. They made an excellent team, their strengths complementing each other perfectly. James Thornton died peacefully in his sleep at 72, leaving Cole and Catherine his share of the ranch in his will, making them full owners of the Double Creek. Joseph and Rose grew up wild and free, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with chores as soon as they were able, absorbing the values their parents lived: hard work, honesty, courage, and compassion. Joseph inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. Rose had her mother's sharp mind and her father's gentle heart. When Joseph was 15 and Rose was 13, Catherine found herself pregnant once more, to everyone's surprise and delight. At 40 years old, she was unsure about having another child, worried about the risks. But Cole held her close and promised that whatever happened, they'd face it together. She gave birth the following spring to another boy, whom they named Thomas Dutch Garrett, honoring both the men who'd been instrumental in their lives at the Double Creek. Thomas was a surprise blessing, a joyful child who seemed to find wonder in everything. Joseph and Rose doted on their baby brother, and he grew up surrounded by love and attention from his entire family. The years passed in the way of settled, happy lives, marked by seasons and celebrations rather than dramatic upheavals. There were challenges, of course, droughts that tested their endurance, harsh winters that cost them cattle, illness that swept through the territory, economic downturns that made every dollar precious. But Catherine and Cole weathered them all together, their love deepening with each challenge overcome. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Joseph was married now, with a child of his own, working the ranch alongside his father. Rose had married a teacher from Laramie and lived in town but visited often. Thomas, just 10 years old, helped serve the food with serious concentration. As Catherine stood on the porch of the house Cole had built for her, looking out over the land they'd worked together for decades, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that went bone deep. She thought about that frightened young woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach in Laramie so many years ago, desperate and determined in equal measure. She thought about Cole's steady voice in the saloon, his simple faith that she deserved a chance. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, coming to stand beside her. He was 51 now, his hair more silver than dark, his face lined by sun and laughter, but he was still the same man who'd captured her heart that first day. "I'm thinking that Dutch was right," Catherine said with a smile. "I was too small to work a ranch." Cole frowned, opening his mouth to protest, but Catherine continued before he could speak. "I was too small," she repeated, "until you showed me I wasn't. Until you helped me become bigger than my circumstances, stronger than my fears. You didn't just hire me, Cole. You gave me my life back. You gave me everything." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her close the way he'd done 1,000 times over the years. "We gave each other everything," he said against her hair. "That's what love does, Catherine. It makes us more than we could ever be alone. You made me whole when I didn't even know I was broken. You gave me a reason to build instead of just survive, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." "So would I," Catherine whispered, tilting her face up for his kiss. "Every single moment, every challenge, every triumph, every ordinary day. I'd choose it all again if it meant choosing you." They kissed there on the porch as the sun set over the Wyoming mountains, their children and grandchild and friends celebrating below them, the ranch thriving around them. A testament to what could be built when two people believed in each other enough to take a chance. Catherine had been small, Dutch had been right about that. But she'd also been brave, and that had made all the difference. In the end, it wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving herself right. Right to take the risk. Right to demand more from life than what had been offered. Right to believe that somewhere in the vast West there was a place she could belong and thrive. And she had found that place, not in the geography of Wyoming, but in the heart of a cowboy who'd seen past her size to the strength within. As the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first tentative conversations and their whispered promises, Catherine and Cole stood together, two lives intertwined so completely that it was impossible to say where one ended and the other began. They had built something beautiful from nothing, something lasting from determination and hope and love that refused to be diminished. And on that anniversary evening, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, Catherine knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, exactly who she was meant to be, with exactly the person she was meant to spend her life beside. Dutch might have said she was too small, but Cole had hired her anyway, and together they had proved that love and faith and courage could overcome any obstacle, could transform any life, could build a legacy that would endure for generations. That was their story, written in sweat and hope across the wild Wyoming land, a love story for the ages.